Welcome to Grace for Dyslexia. Today we address spatial reasoning. This is podcast number 9. John, as a young boy, loved working with blocks, making buildings and designs. He spent hours designing and redesigning structures, creating stories to go with each. He was always looking for new and varied ways to put the blocks together. As he grew, he started to realize the blocks put limits on what he could make. He also enjoyed puzzles of all kinds. John always showed skill in finding just the right size and shape to fit into the open space. He could look at a puzzle piece and in his mind turn it to see if it would fit in the spot he was working on. Many times he would visually reject a piece, just move on to another, which looked more promising. John became quite adept at puzzles and all sorts of thinking about spaces and shapes. Another game John especially liked as a small boy was hide and seek. The reason he liked it so is he was masterful at his ability to find the smallest and most unusual places to hide. He would manage to jam his body in these spots. He was rarely found by the it, but there were a few times he needed to get help to get back out of his hiding place. When John entered school, he really enjoyed all the opportunities to do things with his hands and using his spatial reasoning. But school did not have an endless supply of such things. John found he struggled to learn language and reading. School in this area was very trying for him since he did not really struggle at all in areas like math and science. When John was in middle school, he was diagnosed with dyslexia and received tutoring to improve his skills. John found that the multisensory methods his teacher used allowed John to use his spatial reasoning to aid in his learning language and reading. He learned by using his reasoning and putting letter shapes into the right spaces. Early on, it helped him to work in 3 dimensions, but then transfer the knowledge to 2 dimensions. Being quite bright, John did not require a long period of time before he was able to work through many of his language concerns. When he started looking for jobs as a high school student, John tried to find things that fit his abilities. One summer he spent in a warehouse where he helped with putting product away. On another summer, he spent working in the parts department that had thousands of items. John seemed to know where things were quickly. He also helped with stocking the parts to fit in the spaces. He spent a summer working for an engineering firm as an intern, learning about the spatial problems they dealt with. John did well with mathematics and science, where understanding spatial relationships was important. He went on to college and majored in architecture. John did exceptionally well with most things during his time in college, but he continued to show weakness in his reading, especially on tests. But despite this, John graduated with honors and went on to work as an architect. Now, of course, John had to work his way up in the firm in order to be a senior design architect on a project. He had many years where he was mentored by others and served in a support role on various projects. His capabilities of spatial reasoning were soon discovered and utilized by the firm despite John's position. He was frequently asked for advice on various problems others were having or on something that came up in construction of one of the projects. John many times was able to strategize a solution using his reasoning talents. Many years later, John is now a senior architect of his own firm and has established an excellent reputation as an architect, not only locally but across the country. John has building designs in many locations across the country. Though his reading and writing are not as strong as others and need support, John has more than made up for those weaknesses with the effective use of his spatial reasoning in his career. John has designed many magnificent buildings all over the country. He received awards for his work on a couple occasions. Over the years, he has specialized in unique designs which require very involved and intricate spatial relationships. This unique talent has served him well in his career. So next time you see a really revolutionary building design, think of John and his spatial reasoning abilities and his dyslexia. Inspired by 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10a. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. People with dyslexia seem to think in unique patterns, and these patterns help us provide perspective to the world. In your prayers, ask God to help you find your strengths, talents, and reasoning abilities. Grace for Dyslexia is a podcast dedicated to Christian encouragement for children and adults who have or are struggling with dyslexia. All stories in Grace for Dyslexia are fiction. Names, characters, places, and events are the product of the author's imagination. Any similarities to actual events, locales, or persons living or dead is coincidental.